Alright, so this is going to be a quick one for you. I should have recorded this much earlier, but it is how it is. So, next thing that we have on our agenda is going to be climbing. Now, there are, in my opinion, three main techniques people use in order to climb, but from what I know, there are there's more than just those three ways to climb, but these are the three ways that you can separate and basically use one on by one in order to do certain types of climbs. But keep in mind, again, everything can be fluid. You can combine different things together in order to reach certain goals. And so, starting off, climbing is kind of like an art. It's very old, very ancient, and I would be doing a disservice if people like Xenalian and many other climbers, such as Nikita, who's in the Discord, who's the current climber, who have explained time and time again. I will link this in the description, but basically, this video will explain how the basics of climbing is done, how many certain climbs have been performed. Like, this is a very good tutorial, even though it's old, the physics are still the same. The only difference is, what compared to any other glitches, in my opinion, climbing got the worst end of the stick. Like, wargaming does not like climbing, and their game design is heavily against climbing and climbing methods. And so, even though everything is still technically the same, the issue becomes trying to find a way around certain types of walls. And so, one main thing I want to start off with climbing is that there will be a lot of walls. And if you remember, or if you generally know, there are two types of walls. There is the force field wall, which is basically a wall that goes infinitely up. Like you can see in like Mountain Pass, for example, you'd see it somewhere here where it would be able to go infinitely upward, so it's impossible to go above or below it because it's infinite. But a good example is Fisherman's Bay, where Fisherman's Bay you were able to actually go around the force field wall and still do the climb. And so that's one weakness that you can abuse about it. But besides that, it is near impossible, if not completely impossible, to get past force field walls because you can't even wall breach through them due to the fact they act and perform like a red line of the map. So it's really pretty much impossible to do a lot of climbs nowadays. But one good tip that I would give is you can do small climbs. Like you can see this hill in the bottom corner of the menu. Sorry, I don't think you can see it. Like climbs like that, small hills, small bumps are only areas where you can probably be able to climb if you're looking for climbs. Big climbs are much more challenging, and I am again doing a disservice because there are so many better climbers than me, as it is the most popular type of glitch or exploit in the game that so many people have spent years mastering. So again, people like Xenalian, Akita, um, probably some NA climbers like, let's see, Banana Cannon. Like people like those have investigated their entire lives doing it. But I want to explain how they are doing it and why it is working as such. And so the first type of climb, as you can see here, is solo climbing. Basically, if you're by yourself, you perform the task just by yourself. You can be able to reach certain areas by doing it solo. A lot of these solo climbs nowadays are performed with EBRs, just ramming at full speed. So the actual technique of wiggling and going back and forth isn't really known, and so it's a good thing to keep in mind if the scenario does pop up, because very little people know that, and so they can't really go much further when climbing. But solo climbing is like the most common thing. That's what everybody likes to do, but I'm not going to go climb by climb in the entire game to explain where every single climb in the game is. If you want that, ask Nikita, buy the mod. I'm not explaining that. But what I will explain is stuff like this. Now, this is an old replay, but basically, siege mode climbing is a huge aspect of the game, and it is completely busted. And due to Wargaming's code, what ends up happening is that you can climb super slanted objects on structures and be able to basically climb up any steep surface. And what's fascinating about this is a slight oversight by the game, and I don't know the exact precise reason why, but I can explain generally what is happening. And so you can see here, perfect position, able to snipe from up top here. This is already patched, but siege wall climbing is still a massive thing and has a huge effect in climbing in any map. So, one thing to know about siege wall climbing is why does it work? And this is one thing people don't really think about. When you're climbing, you're climbing at a certain angle. So here on Glacier, basically, if you would see, I'm climbing at this angle right now, trying to climb up, but I don't have the engine power, and I can't like go over this angle. It's too steep for the regular tank, including UDES. But when the UDES goes into siege mode, I'm suddenly able to climb this side of the glacier. Now, the main reason as to why this is happening is imagine you're on Axis, and then the wargaming in wargaming's code, it's like, okay, if the tank is at the X degree, then it can no longer get traction. Well, what the UDES and siege mode vehicles do is that, so this is like a regular axis, so this is the degree that it's trying to climb, and it's not enough, but the UDES can change its axis to make it less steep when using siege mode. So when you angle your tank downwards, the best way to look is the bottom of your tank. From looking at the bottom of your tank, you can tell where your axis is. And so you can see, for example, here, it's much more slanted than here, and here is less slanted, which is why it allows you to climb up these angles. You're basically decreasing the angle based on your siege mode, and most of you probably already know that. I might be over explaining something that's really simple, but again, this works with any siege mode tanks. And so if you have something like an STB, you might be like, oh, it has like 13 degrees of gun depression. Why is the siege mode not working that well for it? Well, you see, it moves its gun down 8 or 10 degrees, and then your axis only changes by only a few degrees. So when compared to like the UDES, it changes by a whole 10 degrees, if I'm correct. Don't quote me on that. So this is why the UDES is so far the most superior siege mode vehicle, but that does not mean every siege mode vehicle can't do it. Any siege mode vehicle can change its axis and climb up steep objects. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is something like this. The ability to push people up certain ledges. And this is pretty simple. You just be able to push over a certain object, and from there you can just start climbing. But what's fascinating is that I've actually run an experiment where I pushed a bunch of people all the way up here, and we almost were able to get to the top of K1. Now, what you want to do is that in climbing, if you can't just manually climb it by yourselves, having groups of people to help push you up to certain areas to climb from that point is always useful. And you can also try and push them or get a bunch of people to climb up to a certain area and then help push at least one person up to reach a new height. And you can keep doing this again and again with more and more people. And so you can try and basically push people up a mountain, and then that one person at the very tip can just climb all the way up to the top. And so combining all these skills together, like siege mode climbing, group climbing, and solo climbing, you can combine all these types of skills together to try and reach the very top of any mountain in the game. And so that's how usually many of the best climbers do, is they have a group of players help push the climbers up. You siege mode up as much as you can, and then you solo climb your way up to the very top. So it's a very nice thing to try and combine together. But again, I am not a professional climber. There are many, many people that have done more than I have, but these are the main skills that I want to keep in mind. And just as a side note, there are multiple ways to try and get up mountains. These are just the three main ways. Like there can be other ways, such as like, you can combine, for example, again, as I said, you can combine different types of glitches together to get certain results. You can combine stuff as wall breach. You can wall breach somebody into an area and then climb up a mountain, or push somebody through a wall, and then after they get breached the wall, they can climb up the mountain. Or a catapult, where you can lead a tank up a high place, and from there they can start climbing, etc. So you don't need to only just push people up. You can use like catapults, you can use alternatives. There are ways to get onto mountains that aren't just these three these this tech tree of climbing. You can combine together to get even more results, which people don't realize. But again, in general, siege climbing, very effective. Getting a group of people to help push you up mountains, very effective. And learning how to climb in general is always a nice tool to have in your arsenal. Anyways, hopefully you guys learned something. This is just a quick one. Goodbye.